Oh, it is exciting times here. Currently, as I am recording this video, the best-selling Sony camera is still the A7IV, and for good reason. It is one of the best hybrid cameras that money can buy. I think it's one of the best value proposition cameras on the market today. Well, Sony has gone and released the Sony A7C II just now, and that camera is basically an A7IV in a smaller, cheaper body with an autofocus upgrade. But there are a few more differences than that, and we will discuss them here in this video and see which camera might be right for you. So now, before I get into the differences of these cameras, people always want to see sample footage, so I'm going to give the people what they want. This is side by side, these two cameras. They share the same sensor and the same processor, so they will be very similar, but still, let's show some side by sides. I will do the all auto mode first. If you just take the camera out and then you just press record right out of the box, here's what you get, and then you can see the different tweaks in the color science Sony has made, and then I will show you in S-Log3, which is what I would always shoot these cameras in. So let's take a look. So as you can see, the footage is very similar. There are small tweaks in color science that Sony does with every new release. They're trying to get better and better colors, and I personally love the colors that are now coming out of Sony cameras, even in picture profile off. I tend to use S-Log3, and then I will do a phantom LUT or a leaming LUT, something like that. However, the standard picture profile looks really, really great these days. Now, something else people always want to know about with cameras is low light performance. Once again, these cameras are identical. I will show you evidence here. They will be the same in low light performance. They are amazing cameras in low light. The max ISO is 102,400. You can get clean results up to very high ISOs, at least 12,800 I find to be quite usable. These cameras are wonderful in low light. If you're a low light shooter, these cameras are for you. The only thing a little bit better is like an FX3, an A7S3, or a ZV-E1, which have that 12 megapixel sensor and have that amazing low light capabilities. But this, plenty good in low light, is the A7C II and the A7IV. Now, something else both cameras share, which is not a strength, is the rolling shutter. The rolling shutter is not fantastic on the A7IV or A7C II. I personally don't have any issues with it with the way I shoot. However, if you're doing a lot of whips and pans, and you're doing really fast moving objects, you're filming NASCAR races, perhaps rolling shutter may be an issue for you. Here is an example of the rolling shutter, and as you can see, it is identical on the two cameras. So both cameras feature the exact same 33 megapixel sensor, and the image is wonderful. It's extremely sharp because you get 7K downsample to 4K, up to 4K 30 with the full frame, and then it crops in 1.5 times when you want to do 4K 60. If you want to go to HD, you can do the 120 frames per second if you want that type of slow motion. They both feature 10 frames per second in mechanical and electronic shutter when it comes to photos. They have the same FZ100 battery, which I think is a great battery. They are both weather resistant, and they're made of a magnesium alloy, so nice tough, rugged bodies on these two cameras. They both have a headphone jack and a mic jack. They feature focus breathing compensation and also focus mapping. And they feature all of the picture profiles, including the S-Log profiles, the HLG, and S-Cinetone. And a quick note about overheating, and the reason this is quick is because I don't have any overheating issues with either of these cameras. Now, I know some people have had some overheating issues depending on where they live and the ambient temperature of the A7IV, but I can tell you here in Canada, I usually shoot in my studio at about 23 degrees Celsius. That's somewhere, I will put it on the screen, in Fahrenheit. I don't really understand Fahrenheit, but I have run 4K 60 until the battery runs out, and I have never had the heat warning come on. And in the other modes, 4K 24, 4K 30, the heat warning has never even come on for me in the A7IV, but I know that is different for other people. Now, I thoroughly tested the A7C2 and the A7CR, hooked them up to HDMI monitors, did long streaming sessions. I had them in warmer temperatures, and I couldn't get the warning heat light to come on either of those two cameras. So what I'm saying is I am personally very comfortable with the overheating or lack thereof on those cameras, the A7C2, the A7CR, and the A7IV for that matter. But of course, your mileage may vary depending on where you are and where you put your camera. Don't put it in the blazing sun. Always try to keep your cameras in shade. That's a good rule of thumb. If there's no shade around, put up a little umbrella. It's going to help you out a lot in life. Anyway, but that is enough of the similarities. Let's talk about the differences between these two bad boys. The A7C2, let's start there. We'll talk about the advantages that the A7C2 brings to the table now over the A7IV. And the first one has got to be the AI chip. So this AI chip is giving the A7C2 the ability to have redonkulous autofocus. It is stupendous. The A7IV, the autofocus is amazing. The tracking is amazing. I didn't think you could do any better than that, but they have done that. So this AI tracking, it can just animals and people, like as they spin around, it can predict where the eye is going to be as they turn around. It is crazy autofocus. So as much as I find it odd to say, the A7C2 has better autofocus than the A7IV. The autofocus in the A7C2 also has more subject recognition. You have human and animal and bird in the A7IV, but you also have insects and planes and trains and automobiles, and you can also select different sections of the different things that you are focusing on with the A7C2. The autofocus system is crazy good, and you have the ability to focus on far more subjects. And with that AI chip, you also get that cool new feature, which is the AI auto framing. So the camera can basically, if it's on a tripod, it can sort of follow you around the frame, make it kind of look like you have friends. There's a person who's actually filming you. Someone can tolerate your presence. Isn't that great? Sony's looking out for us losers over here. So it also has the ability to zoom in at 15-second or 30-second increments and then zoom back out. And what's very cool about this is that if you are going to, say, an external recorder, like I have a Ninja 5 attached to this camera right now, you can do the full frame on the Ninja 5, and then you can have the zooming in or out or the auto framing actually recorded to the SD card. So you could actually have both of the footages. So you can mix and match and have so many different angles and dynamic shots. Clear image zoom. For the A7C2, clear image zoom is now quite useful. So you can zoom in 1.5 times and basically won't have any perceptible loss in quality, at least to my eyes, but it wasn't that useful on the A7IV because you would lose your eye detect autofocus and your ability to track objects. Whereas with the A7C2, you keep the eye autofocus, you keep the tracking, so clear image zoom is really great now, and it basically gives you extra focal length out of every single lens that you use. Sony reports 7 stops of IBIS in the A7C II versus the 5.5 stops of IBIS on the A7 IV. And you can definitely see that when you are trying to take pictures. It is easier to get lower shutter speeds on the A7C II. Now I will show you in video the difference here. So first I will just use the regular IBIS. I won't turn on the active stabilization in the A7C II and the A7 IV. And then you can see the difference between the two IBIS systems. And I do think the A7C II is better. Let me show you that now. But of course, in video, I would not use IBIS alone. I personally don't think it's good enough in the Sony cameras to use IBIS alone, whereas I do very much like the active steady shot, where it uses about a 10% crop and uses electronic stabilization. It does a very good job. Let's take a look at that now. Now, if I'm being honest, I gotta say, I don't see much difference between the two in terms of active stabilization. The A7 IV looks great. The A7C II looks great. When it's IBIS alone, yes, I can see the difference between the A7C II and the A7 IV. But when you get into that active mode, I think the A7 IV does absolutely great. And of course, both these cameras record gyroscopic data, so you could even smooth out your footage more. If you wanted gimbal-like footage without a gimbal, you can run the file through Catalyst Browse or the paid program Catalyst Prepare or the Gyroflow program. It's about hair, that one. It's not about stabilization. Fro knows, gyrofro.com. This next one is a big one for me, and that is 4K 30 streaming over USB-C. Now, you have to use the standard picture profile when you do it this way. You can't use S-Log3 and apply a user LUT or something like that. Now, you can still do that if you just run through the HDMI cord and then apply your LUTs as per usual of going through OBS or Ecamm Live, something like that. However, if you just want to stream straight from the camera with one cord, USB-C, which I love to do, you would use the standard picture profile, and the A7C II allows you to do that up to 4K 30. It looks so great, and it is my preferred way to stream. The A7 IV only does 4K 15, so you wouldn't use that because it would look weird, and so you would switch it down to 1080 30, which, you know, to me, I want the 4K. I love the 4K. The A7C II allows you to add user LUTs. So if you want to use your Leeming LUT or your Phantom LUT or another LUT that you have, you can just put it right in the camera there, and instead of looking at that gray washed out S-Log3 footage, you can actually see how your footage is going to look on your old computational device. I find that very cool. You get to see the image on the little LCD. The A7C II has an in-camera time-lapse mode. This is a new mode on the new Sony cameras. You, of course, can still do regular time-lapses on the A7 IV with their interval shoot function, is what they call it in the menu. You can do the interval shoot function and then do your regular time-lapse, or you can use S&Q as well on the A7 IV, which I like to do. But there is an additional time-lapse mode that is dedicated on the A7C II, and where it can make the time-lapse for you in camera. My Panasonic cameras have done that in the past. I really like that. That way you just set up your time-lapse, press the button, and then it makes you that nice 4K file right in the camera. It saves me a lot of work. The A7C II is smaller and lighter. You have 514 grams versus 659 grams. That is a substantial amount of weight, and you can really feel it when you are holding the two cameras. And it's also better for things like gimbal work, especially with its form factor being the way it is, that nice rangefinder. It doesn't have the EVF popping up, so it's, to me, much better for gimbal, much better for travel, small, compact, light for vlogging. I mean, it makes a big difference. The A7C II has that new updated touchscreen where you can swipe things off the screen or on the screen and have extra controls right there at a touch. And you can also manipulate your shutter speed and your aperture and your ISO just by dragging your finger on the screen. So it is a nice update to the touchscreen that the A7 IV does not have. And lastly, of course, the price. The A7C II is coming in at a cheaper price than the A7 IV. So let's get into the advantages that the A7 IV has over the A7C II. And first and foremost to me is the 2 card slots. To have that redundant recording is essential for a lot of people in a lot of situations. Some people don't mind having the 1 card slot, but often when you're on a paid gig, you do want that redundancy. So having the 2 card slots, I think, is fantastic. Also, one of the A7 IV's card slots is also a CF Express A card, so you can get that more robust, more reliable card as well. It has a bigger and better EVF, 3.69 million dot EVF. Now the A7C II, its EVF is actually pretty good because they have increased the brightness a lot, so it's almost as bright as the A7R5's EVF. So it looks quite good. It's just the A7 IV, it's bigger, it's more comfortable, and it's a higher resolution EVF, so it's a better one. And in case you're wondering, both cameras share that 1.04 million dot LCD, which is still quite usable. I do wish it was a better resolution. However, it is definitely usable out in the bright sunshine when you're in sunny weather mode. The A7 IV has a little joystick on the back, which a lot of photographers, they love and they can't live without, and I can understand it. Helps you just set the point of your autofocus just with your thumb there as you're taking the picture, and that is not available on the A7C II. You have 3 extra customizable buttons on the A7 IV, and that can make a big difference to people in the field, people who like to customize their cameras with all of the buttons on the back. The A7 IV will definitely give you more options. The shutter speed can go to 1/8000 on the A7 IV in mechanical shutter. On the A7C II, you can only go to 1/4000, and unless you switch it into electronic shutter. If you go into silent mode and you're using the electronic shutter, you can then go to 1/8000. But if you want to stay in mechanical, the A7 IV, 1/8000. The A7 IV has a full-size HDMI port versus a micro HDMI port, and of course I prefer that very much. But I will say I do like where Sony is putting the micro HDMI ports on their cameras, so as you can see, when the screen is flipped open, then the micro HDMI port doesn't really get in the way, so you get to at least see your screen better when you do it that way. With the A7 IV, the full-size HDMI is blocking my LCD a little bit, so I prefer the location of the micro HDMI port, but of course I'm going to say this is a pro for the A7 IV because you always want that full-size HDMI port if you can get it. So I think both of these cameras are ridiculously great hybrid cameras and 2 of the best cameras that you can possibly buy on the market today when you're doing price to value of what you are getting. I love them. I think that you will be happy with either. You just have to choose which one is best for your needs. Anyway, thanks for watching this. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.